and social justice advocate, no stranger to us here on Indymedia, Gerry Georgatos is going to be having a chat to us about his new book about Cleveland Dodd, who died in custody in 2023. So we'll be having a chat about that.
Yeah, it's great to have Gerry on the show. He's been a long time advocate, and it's really amazing. I was reading it. I think he wrote this book in sort of like 10 weeks or something. It's quite amazing as he did it for Cleveland's mother, Nadene. So yeah, it would be really interesting to hear from him and what this book's about and what inspired it. We now have stranger to the Indymedia show, Mr. Gerry Georgatos on the line. He's a tireless social justice advocate, journalist, someone who's been on this program many, many times, who's largely involved in issues of Indigenous rights and Indigenous justice, among many other things. And he's just completed a soon-to-be officially released novel, Cleveland Dodd, Child of the Desert Sunrise, an account of the very tragic death in custody of 16-year-old Yamatji boy Cleveland Dodd, who died in custody here in WA Corrective Services as they were essentially detaining him in an adult prison. He was found unresponsive in his cell in the early morning on the 12th of October 2023 in Unit 18, a notorious wing of the maximum security prison, Casuarina Prison. Gerry joins us on the line now. Thanks very much for joining us this morning, Gerry.
Hi, Ray. Hi, Zoe.
Hey, Gerry. So you've been involved in issues of Aboriginal justice, including deaths in custody, suicidality and other systematic issues facing our Indigenous brothers and sisters for decades now. But can you provide us a bit of an overview with regard to the case of Cleveland and his story, which is dismally not uncommon in our prison and detention centres here in Australia, and why this case specifically has inspired you to write a novel?
Well, he's a child of the First Peoples, and the atrocities and the abominations that have continued on since the sins of the nation in holding people back and in denying them the rights that they're denied to no others in this continent is a story that just doesn't change. There's little redress to the extent that it should be, and we've got racialised economic narratives that deny the descendants of the First Peoples and every right and opportunity to redress repetitive affirmative actions. They just don't happen. Cleveland Dodd was a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old that went in and out of Banksia Hill Juvenile Detention Centre, or the child's prison as I call it. And he spent the last year of his life in Unit 18. He was first failed at Banksia Hill because to go to Unit 18 you must be failed at Banksia Hill. And the children of Unit 18 are the failures of Banksia Hill, the ones that have just given up on and then hold up in a corral of human misery, a holding pen, because that's what Unit 18 actually is. It's about 100% transition rate to adult incarceration, to miserable lives, and in Cleveland's case, to his death. So he was the first child in Western Australia to die in a prison setting as a child. And since then, there's been a second child, a non-Indigenous child, a 17-year-old white boy who's also died in Banksia Hill. So Banksia Hill is a fail abysmally. Unit 18 is a fail abysmally. We haven't learned the lessons. We don't go forwards. We don't, it was foreseeable. That's the problem. And for me, I'm part of this as I'm part of many injustices, First Nations and non-First Nations, migrants and others, and the poor and the crushing poor, because it's foreseeable. And that's the abomination and that hurts and haunts and that we have to address. And it's foreseeable that it will happen again. It's foreseeable that we will lose another child. It's the 18th child that we've lost in prison settings, in child prisons in Australia, but it's the first Cleveland and the other boy Will, I won't mention his surname, and that have died in Western Australia. So they're two of 18, a 12-year-old who never leaves my mind, died in Ashley in 2012 in Tasmania.
So there was an inquest into Cleveland's death that took place in 2024. The assessment of that was partly handed down in July this year. Since that inquest, is there any indication that any of the issues contributed to Cleveland's death? And have they at all been addressed by the West Australian government?
They keep children a little busier with activities in both Banksia Hill and Canning Vale and in Unit 18, where there's about a dozen kids on average at any one time. But activities don't change lives. Activities might reduce self-harms, which is good. But post-custody, we've lost 100 kids since the establishment of Banksia Hill in 1997. We've lost more than 100 children to suicide in the first year post-release. So there are also the deaths after custody, not just the deaths in custody. We've got to look at the whole picture, post-custody and on parole and the like, whatever. But post-custody, even when they've completed, when they've not completed and they're on parole, even when they're on bail, not remanded, they're not supported. The transformative doesn't happen. The people aren't there in their lives to nurture them, the educators, the psychiatrists, psychologists, the facilities that could be set up to assist many of them, because a lot of them, of these children, live on the streets and they go back to the streets. A lot of them have both their parents in jail, or if they've got one parent in jail and the other parent absent, and their carers are struggling, who are often their kin, their grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and are unable to meet their needs. And we've got kids who are orphans, who have got no one. And there are, in many circumstances, dangerous safety nets, so we guarantee lives turnstile to adult incarceration once they're 18, or to death after custody while they're still children, and to, abysmal invalidation. And that's what we should, recognise and understand, the unfairness that these children have been, anchored with. And if we don't understand the unfairness as a first step, we're not going to go anywhere at all. Mm-hmm. But the life transformative programs don't happen, the support doesn't happen, and the reporting residence that should be happening inside the Bastion of Banksia Hill as a community resource facility rather than a prison. It should be abolished as a prison, as a carceral setting, and transformed into a supportive bastion. And I'll leave it at that.
Mm. Gerry, when the initial, the findings, that are not the complete findings, but partly handed down back in July, it was the coroner did say that he may call for a special inquiry into the circumstances that led to the opening of Unit 18. Back then, in July this year, the Corrective Services Commissioner, Brad Royce, would not say whether he'd even support such an inquiry. And look, we know that, these inquiries, that they occur, and nothing really changes, and that's the circumstance that we've found ourselves in. And what you're saying there is seemingly, unfortunately, not enough has changed, and the fact that these places are even still operating and children are still being effectively put into prisons in this way is really alarming and such a damaging indictment on our society in many respects. I guess just writing this book, must have been it's something you're already very passionate about and about, but it must have been quite a sort of intense insight into everything that occurred in relation to Cleveland's case. But what, I guess, did you find sort of in terms of potential reform that could occur, that, hypothetically, if we actually had a state government that really wanted to address this, if we had the political will to address this? We've interviewed you so many times on the show, but was there anything in particular that you saw that really just needs to occur and to happen, even just specifically here in WA? I know this is a huge issue, but what are some things that just could be being done to properly address this and ensure that these young people stop being killed in these systems?
Do what I did with Megan Cracker and my daughter Connie in 2020 in Banksia Hill, and we worked inside there for 8 weeks when the quarantine took place. and all non-essential workers in Western Australia were quarantined to their homes. We worked on the inside. We were seconded because they were desperate. They had the lowest staffing levels ever and the highest rates of incidences. And they wanted de-escalation. They asked us to come in March when the quarantine came to the fore. And on that same day, we went down at the Commissioner's request to Banksia Hill, met with the superintendent, and the superintendent said, can you start straight away? I said, what, we got a big screening? Can you start straight away? We're desperate. You've always wanted to get in here. You've got in here. You've got your chance. So I took them by the throat, to be honest, and told my crew that, we might never get another chance like this. We'll do the de-escalations that they want, but we'll also focus on restorative work, because what works should work from the first day. And I refused to work from the admin and an office, and that we would work out of the compounds, the holding pens, their cells, in their spatial contexts. And we won't be denied access to anywhere. If we want to go to the intensive support unit, we go. So, and the guards don't have to be over our shoulders. That's a no-no. So we de-escalated every incident, to summarise that. Every potential incident in Banksia Hill. Our first potential incident was 15 minutes into commencement of that day, because we started straight away, and we de-escalated that incident within 15 minutes. So we had 100% track record. We had rapport, resonance, and that's the key issue, dynamic partnerships with the young ones, trust. And we listened to their stories. We didn't interrupt. We let them pour out their hearts. And, even if we felt like we needed something to say, we didn't say it, because it's about listening in the first instance, validating them. And the sorrow and the suffering that we heard was, devastating. Even if it's not unimaginable to me, it is to most household Australians. But even to hear it to someone who's as hardened as I am and as seasoned as I am, still broke the heart, and tears often flooded. We focused in on the girls in those 8 weeks. We've set up case plans the like have never been before. 22 were released by the Children's Court upon submission of my case plans, and we more than halved the prison population of the girls, 31 prison entrants over those 8 weeks in that period. So we showed the way. We showed nurture, seasoned expertise, rapport, dynamic partnerships, resonance. We provided post-custody support. We provided the life transformative qualifications, tickets to working, trade, going back to school, supporting them in retention with caseworkers and the like that doesn't exist on a 24/7 basis, and supporting orphans and children that had dangerous safety nets and nowhere to turn to, so that they could always turn to us. So we did that work. And that's the work they do in the Scandinavian countries. The solutions are there. It's about these dynamic partnerships. In Scandinavia, 90% of children that offend once will not offend again. In Western Australia, 90% of children that offend once will offend a second, third, fourth, fifth time, somewhere in 20, 30, 40, 50 times. And they go in and out. So what is it that the Scandinavians do, the Norwegians, the Dutch, the Danish? They surround them. They immerse them. They don't incarcerate them. They transform their lives. They surround them with nurturers who are social workers, and also the guards are actually, seasoned social workers themselves, so they're not guards, they're nurturers, they're mentors, more likely. It's a mentor-mentee approach. But they're immersed 24/7 in the culture of educators, psychologists, social workers, counsellors, child psychologists, child trauma psychologists, and the like, and they change lives. What our politicians need to do is get on a plane. And the Premier, I said, should get on a plane. The Prime Minister should get on a plane. The opposition leader should get on a plane. The leading figures of other political parties in opposition should get on a plane, go to Oslo in Norway, and immerse themselves in what they do there that goes so well that their carceral settings, if we can call them that, which they are, only have 4 children. In Australia, we have 1,000 children in detention. So, and they support those 4 children too, who have committed murder, and change their lives, because that's what community reckoning wants: community safety and the redeemer in society. That's what we need to see working. And we don't have any of the seasoned expertise. We don't have any of the mentor-mentee approaches. We had guards rebadged as mentors. What a cheap sneak in! What a cheap, locking out of those who should have been in there in the first place at Unit 18 as mentors and at Banksy Hill. So, yeah, there's some of the solutions, and, and they're not rocket science. They're about, in academic terms, I can academize it all you want, as I've said in the past before. But, spread the love. That's what it is. But with seasoned expertise, with knowledge of an academic nature that knows how to go about transforming lives and the issues that they deal with, psychologically injurious and emotional battering, from the beginning of life, that they've never had a chance.
So your book's not only a very appropriate resource for the government to have a read of and then, I guess, implement their own, spending time to improve and reform the systems, as you've just highlighted, but for everyday people, how can they have a read of the book, and what do you hope that they gain to learn from having a read?
We have a book launch on December 1, and we've gone into pre-sales beforehand, and that's been fortuitous because we've made quite a bit. We've had 4,000 sold, and that's in a matter of weeks. And we're giving away 1,000 at the launch for people who can't afford them, because they're $50 all inclusive, with delivery and all the like. So we're trying to get them out to everybody. The Premier has actually asked for a copy of the book to be dropped off to Duma's house in West Perth, so I've yet to do that, but we'll do that. And we've got it to a lot of people that it would matter. But the book was a semi-memoir of Cleveland and an exposure of the institutions that have failed in forensic detailing. I have Parkinson's disease, and I can only write and type with one finger. So I did it in 10 weeks. And I did it in 10 weeks because Mother Nadene had wanted it done in terms of the 2 years that have passed since his final breath on October the 19th. His eyes closed and never opened up again on October the 12th, and his burial on December 1. And that coincides the book launch. So we've raised from the proceeds money to fund the mother's wish for an appropriate headstone, the way she wants it as a mother, for her eldest child of 6 siblings. And also proceeds will go to the education of some of the other children. A couple we've got into education, boarding schools and the like, and the others remain, and one is 3 years without schooling, and we want to get them into boarding school so they can navigate their two cultural streams, that of the mainstream and that of their peoples, and they're rich in culture. They're rich in culture, but they don't have the journey with education to give them the opportunity to put food on the table for their prospective families if they get that far, and to have the life that they should have and enjoy their culture at that same time bipartisan.
Gerry, just finally, you mentioned there's a launch coming up. Would you be able to share those details with us just in case people want to come along, or what's the best way they can, find out more and ideally get a copy of the book? Okay,
so one, they can email me at coordinator@suicidepreventionproject.com.au. That's coordinator@suicidepreventionproject.com.au, and I'll acquire the book. I'll tell them how. Right. They can call me on 0430-657-309. They can be aware that on December 1 we're having a launch. We were going to have a mini launch in Laverton because that's where Nadene is now, and the 20% of the population in Laverton, which is the First Peoples, are keen on a copy of the book, and also a lot of the general population. It's about 400 people there, 80% non-First Peoples and 20% First People. So there's a lot of interest, and we've got, even from the Beyond, the Great Beyond store in Laverton, they've asked. They're in the bookstore in Margaret River, and there'll be other bookstores that I'll be lined up in too. In Sydney we've got Glebe Books in Glebe. They're stocking up. So we're getting it out, but we went pre-launch with pre-sales, and a lot will change. But on December 1, there will be a launch in Perth, and I will advise of when, of where we're going to do it. We're mulling over a few places.
Yep.
We'll let you know.
Okay.
And will those updates be available on your website or on social media, or do you want them? Do people need to join a mailing list?
And I'll give them to RTRFM, and we've got mailing lists and all. So
we'll keep people informed.
And
You're basically the fifth member of the program anyway by this point, Gerry. So I'm sure we can.
I don't know about
have
that. I don't know about that.
No, it's always such a pleasure to have you on the show, mate. Really appreciate you talking to us this morning, and congratulations on the book. If that's an appropriate thing to say for such a subject, but it's such an important thing, and much respect.
10 weeks with one finger is pretty incredible, despite.
Amazing,
the context.
Yeah. And look, much respect and love to you, mate. You're tireless advocate.
I will close it off on this. The book is dedicated to Cleveland's mother, Nadene. She both insisted and inspired me to write it. And for most days over the past 2 years, Nadene and I have spoken about the injustices her son endured. We've had about 300 conversations, sometimes from 1 o'clock in the morning till 5 or 6. And, the heartbreak, the devastation that this family continues to live through is, what no one should go through. And but Mum wanted it, and I've never believed any book changes the world. I wasn't keen on writing it, but I hope it makes some difference.
We really hope that our listeners can get a copy of it and read it, and I personally look forward to reading it myself. Thanks very much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Gerry.
I'll drop a couple of books off at RTRFM for you.
Amazing, thank you.
That was Gerry Georgatos, a long-time social justice advocate and a frequent contributor to this program, talking to us about his new book, Cleveland Dodd, The Desert Sun.